and gentlemen, welcome to the latest, greatest edition of Nick's Nonfiction here with your host, Nick Muniz. This time on the show, we have got Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind. When Michael Pollan set out to research how LSD and psilocybin are being used to provide relief for people suffering from depression, addiction, and anxiety, he did not intend to write what is undoubtedly his most personal book. But upon discovering how these remarkable substances are improving the lives of not only the mentally ill, but also healthy people coming to grips with the challenges of everyday life, he decided to explore the landscape of the mind. Same way I drive around the country like a beatnik, Pollan has done so with the mind, a mental beatnik. Thus began a singular adventure into various altered states of consciousness, along with a deep dive into both the latest brain science and thriving underground communities of psychedelic therapists. Pollan shifts his historical record to separate the truth from the mysterious drug myths. You're gonna fry your brain like an egg, reefer madness. Psych means mind, delic means to reveal. All these substances do is show you your subconscious. Observation over easy. It's not just about psychedelic drugs, but also about eternal... Bro, meditate. You're gonna learn all the lessons today. This book is a travelogue for astral trips. Fasten your seatbelts. We'll be right back. The other Michael Pollan. He's a bumblebee. Michael Pollan, born February 6, 1955, is an American author and journalist who is currently professor of nonfiction arts at Harvard. Nonfiction arts? How do I get that jump? At Harvard. This guy hit the snob trifecta. Oxford, Columbia, and he also taught at Berkeley. And Harvard. This fucking snob. The most famous book you might have heard of that he wrote was The Omnivore's Dilemma. Critiques industrial food chains. We got our boy Eric Schlosser around these parts for that. And this book was from 2018. Here's the thesis. Pollan argues that psilocybin and LSD are not drugs that make people go crazy, which is the biggest misconception people have about psychedelics, but rather drugs that help a person become more sane, by example, eliminating a fear of death. Motherfuckers out here imagining hell. You don't think that makes you a little more anxious than drugs? We're going deep today. We'll flesh it out like a mushroom after a meme. Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind, Chapter 1, The Doors of Perception. Pollan starts off, the impact of the two molecules, lysergic acid dimethylide and LSD, are hard to overestimate. And psilocybin. I already messed up. Talk about LSD and fucking mushrooms in the first sentence. All the suburban moms pack it up and go home. Social perceptions around LSD and psilocybin have changed over the years. You could go back and listen to our edition Chaos. We've also done Reefer Madness. There's a lot of campaigns going around to form the stigmas around these substances. But the point here, by the 90s, universities were starting to study these chemicals. So rather than doing acid in a field to Jimi Hendrix, you're strapping research students to chairs and putting labels on the experiences. It's real life. Set is the mindset or expectation one brings into the experience, and setting is the environment in which it takes place. No two trips are the same because they tend to magnify whatever is going on inside and outside one's head. No two trips are the same, man, because you're constantly changing, bro. No man ever walks through the same river twice, man. We can mock it. Last year, or it might have been 2 years ago, I did the microdosing handbook. I don't have to tell you guys anymore. Season 7. These things help. I'll make the case, though. As a species, we've been changing our consciousness for as long as we can remember. Psychedelics are one of the safest ways, if not an interesting way to do this. Well, is it safe or not, bub? But that doesn't mean the path is without risk. Bad trips happen when people behave stupidly. People have bad trips because they didn't check their mindset. Remember, set and setting. You have to include that dumb quote, because people are going to take this shit and be done with it. You know, it's a power plant. You're going to take acid at the Daytona 500? Yeah, well, don't be surprised when that guy jumps over onto the track. Set and setting. You want to listen to supercars whiz by at 250 miles an hour while you're tripping? As a species, evolutionarily speaking, habits are what make our life possible. If we don't run on autopilot for much of the day, we would be exhausted by the afternoon. But psychedelics shake up the snow globe and temporarily break us from our habits. They block every mental path forward and back, immersing us in a flow of present world. Literally wonderful. That's his quote. He's making it sound a little too fantastical. Even I'm cutting this with a little bitter. You think I'm the Mr. Sugar Cakes and cookies and cream when it comes to psychedelics? Motherfucker, you're gonna have a bad trip. Get ready. But the stigma is wrong. Maybe. I don't know anything. That's his point, chapter 1. Michael Pollan. Go collect some honey, would you? He says, the good thing is I'm seldom surprised. The bad thing is I'm seldom surprised. He loves it. He loves being an author. This thing was 500 pages. He does hit on all the heavy beats. Next chapter is hippie history, but he dips his dough into Stanislav Grof. In the 90s, Grof began teaching something called holotropic breathwork, a technique for inducing a psychedelic state of consciousness without drugs. No drugs! By means of deep, rapid, and rhythmic breathing, usually accompanied by loud drumming. Okay, think about it this way. Never do drugs, people. Don't listen to me. You might have to meditate for 40 years. Nah, the holotropic breathing, hippies are so fucking lazy and cheap, they found a way to get high off their breath. Jerry, there's all these hippies lying around. They figured out how to get high without paying. They're getting high on their own supply. You don't need drugs. All of this is free. Change your mind. Yeah, so that's what this episode is. I'm going to say this a million more times, bro. You can do this by hyperventilating. Here's a Webster definition of a drug. A substance intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease. People do breath work. Your doctor will tell you to do breath work if you're having a panic attack. Here's this paper bag, a highly medical device. Breathe into it. It's the bag that's fixing you. It's not your breath. Oh, I need my medical paper bags. Your breath is a drug. You get high off of breathing. Motherfuckers think they're sober. All he's saying, chapter 1, the scheduling of drugs is nonsensical. So again, you guys can write off the entire body of work about perceptual change. The thesis still stands because you could do this through breathing. Nick, you're doing drugs. I could take my pills all day. You did a drug. Having fun with it. Imagine a caveman transported into the middle of Manhattan. He sees buses, cell phones, skyscrapers, airplanes, then zap him back into the cave. What does he say about the experience? It was big. It was impressive. It was loud. Yeah, like my cock. He doesn't have the vocabulary for skyscraper, elevator, cell phone. Unga bunga. Maybe he has an intuitive sense that there was some sort of significant order to the scene, but there are words that we need that don't yet exist. We've got the 5 crayons when we need 50,000 different shades. You can't talk about this stuff. It doesn't make sense. We don't have the vocabulary yet. Or we kind of do, but it's just magic, and people aren't ready for that combo. First time you go into the fourth dimension, try putting that into words. How many hundreds of writers have been there? You got to turn it into fiction. Doing dust in the desert of Dune. You're going to get eaten by a sandworm. Try putting it into words. The mystical journey seems to offer a graduate education into the obvious, yet people come out of the experience understanding these platitudes in a new way. Seeing the obvious in a new way. That's a great way to put it. You know you shouldn't have your addictions, but it takes changing your mind, seeing it from a different angle. You don't have to take a mega dose and shift 360 degrees. Shift 1 degree, and you will see that it's possible to change. What does he have here? Transius, noeticism, essential passivity. Bunch of big words. He's trying to build up his 50,000 box of crayons. I need more words. Magic. Chapter 1. Power plants give you the ability to see the obvious from a new door of perception. Chapter 2. Hippie history. Bill Richards quote, "You go deep enough or far enough out in consciousness, and you'll bump into the sacred. It's not something we generate. It's something out there, waiting to be discovered." Blast me off to the moon. You go deep enough or far enough out, man. That was a quote from 1999. This was written in 2018. Pollen is meeting with Paul Stamets. He's on the streets as the Mushroom King nowadays. Paulie. Mushrooms can have various uses, next to being eaten by us, and Stamets is one of those biggest advocates. He researches looking at cancer, stimulating our immune response, cleaning up pollution, protection against diseases, insect infestation. Mushrooms could cure the garbage patch. They could do a lot. Stamets, he's most known for the super stack. Lion's mane, several species for clarity in a daily pill. Stamets wrote a field guide in 1996, Psychedelic Mushrooms of the World. He's got that famous story riding out a lightning storm, 30 dry grams. McKenna took 9 grams and saw the jackalope. I took 2 pounds and got arrested in South Dakota. This Stamets guy, he's got like a mushroom university in Washington. It's not really a school, but he owns a warehouse. I went to in Guatemala, San Marcos, Lake Atitlan. It's one of the biggest mushroom communities in the world. Went cliff jumping with some of the more knowledgeable folk there. They're talking about smoking bufo, toad venom, all that shit. I hit him with the book knowledge. Psilocybins are saporites, living off of dead plant matter and dung. Who's the gringo? Bro, you could open a warehouse. You don't need to go to fucking anywhere in the world to do mushrooms. I think America might be the next frontier, now that it's getting legalized some places. Further back, 1960s. Turn on, tune in, drop out. The parents are saying, oh my god, these chemicals have never been tested. Quote, there have been 40,000 research participants and more than thousands of clinical papers. The research into psychedelics was blossoming between 1949 and 1966, but few remember this. Oh no, the Manson family! Nobody's ever tested the chemicals! Sandoz, a pharmaceutical company, was the one making the LSD and providing it for researchers. The first thing for those researchers was LSD seemed to change the minds of the participants. Had it change your mind? But remember set and setting. You're probably not going to want to have your first trip at a CIA black site. He starts talking about hypnosis. Hypnosis is just when something has direct access to your limbic system. So I'm talking about set and setting. If you take some shrooms and go into the woods, you equalize. Get that Schumann resonance. If you take shrooms and you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, you're back in the loop. I'm in the CIA black site. They're playing Mr. Beast and RuPaul Drag Place while I'm on mushrooms. No. Let me out. Turn on, tune in, drop out. Culture could be hypnosis. Your brain gives you a chemical reward for confirmation. For doing what society wants, you're getting hits of drugs. by playing along. Well, Nick, I've never been hypnotized. You ever been to a movie? The first 15 minutes of trailers, you're already hypnotized. It's that quick. Bro, psychedelics, I'm not saying they're inherently good today. They're just a tool. If you trip in a black site, you are going to become a Manchurian candidate. Satin setting. There's no research. The entire 1940s and 50s, they were dosing people underground. LSD can be directly linked to the discovery of serotonin and the creation of antidepressants. LSD in your mind creates the SSRIs. But mushrooms are Schedule 1. No known medical benefits. 1940s would say otherwise. One of the experiments done in the first wave looked at LSD to help alcoholics stay sober. The results were promising. In roughly half the cases, they reported the treatment worked. The volunteers got sober and remained so for several months. Months? Off of one trip? Or you take SSRIs forever. Hoffer also mentions that they didn't only look at the chemicals, but also at the subjective experience as a key factor in the treatment. Setting. Think about what I just said. They took alcoholics off the street. They were able to cure 50% of them for several months. Lifelong alcoholics. Half of them put the fucking bottle down immediately. You know what the success rate for Alcoholics Anonymous is? 8%.
Holy crap!
8. And that takes a decade of commitment. What if I told you there's a 50% chance I can cure you of alcoholism tomorrow? But no, we're not allowed. It is Schedule 1, and I will put you in a cage in a foreign state. I'm hitting that rump shaker. Getting arrested for mushrooms. I'm the bad guy. It's all good. 8 to 12% Alcohol Anonymous. I'm giving the old ladies mushrooms at the alcohol store, bringing that number down. Allegedly. An engaged and empathetic therapist was crucial for guiding the trip to shape the experience. When the positive result of the alcohol cessation studies were being replicated without the guidance, they failed utterly. Setting, all that. Bill Watson of Alcoholics Anonymous was another proponent of LSD. The high-power effect of AA is said to have originated from an LSD trip. The guy created the entire AA process off an LSD trip. It's only bad. The demons will possess you. He came up with AA. You know the 13th step was supposed to be taking LSD? I wish I was joking. That was the original 13th step. And think about it. That would have saved a lot more than 8% of people. But there's a stigma. I was having a conversation with someone once. Do you know how LSD was created? My fucking computer brain goes off. Albert Hofmann, April 19th, 1936, bicycle day. Swiss chemist. Stumbled upon LSD, rode his bike home, drank a gallon of milk, yada yada. The person I'm talking to, they went, actually LSD was created to be tested on army soldiers, and they all went crazy. Where'd you hear about that? It was in the movie Full Metal Jacket.
Holy crap!
Stigmas. Hollywood stigmas. Think about how powerful hypnotism can be to trump objective fact. Typically involving a single high-dose session, usually of LSD, that took place in comfortable surroundings. The subject stretched out on a couch with a therapist in attendance who said very little, allowing the journey to unfold according to its own logic. To eliminate distractions and encourage an inward journey, music is played and the subject usually wears eye shades. Must. Eye shades, that's a major key. After Albert Hofmann, you got Al Hubbard. He introduced an estimated 6,000 people to LSD between 1955 and 1966. Many of them were people in positions of power. His goal was to shift the course of history. Yeah, you can't trust this Al Pollen guy too much. Hubbard, operative. Jokes. In 1969, more than 2 million Americans had taken LSD, but the public opinion was about to change. Some might blame it on Leary, but Pollan argues that without him, the same backlash would have happened. Next to cultural problems, the research into psychedelics was difficult, if not impossible, to double-blind and too close to shamanism for comfort. Not science-y enough. We're going to stick with AA. Roll out the Manson family play, stigmatize the crap out of psychedelics. Chapter 3, Back Underground. Music is one of the aspects that is now being studied as something that guides and shapes the psychedelic experience. Classical music is for now the most popular choice when doing research. Pollan was going off about Yo-Yo Ma. Yo Mama.
Soda!
He listens to Yo-Yo Ma while he's on acid. 4 hours and 4 grams of magic mushrooms into the journey, this is where I lost whatever ability I had to distinguish subject from object, tell apart what remained of me and what was box music. Instead of Emerson's transparent eyeball, egoless, and all of it beheld, I became a transparent ear, indistinguishable from the stream of sound that flooded my consciousness until there was nothing else. Not even a dry, tiny corner in which to plant and observe. I opened myself to the music. I became first the strings. I could feel it on my skin, the exquisite friction of the horsehair rubbing all over me, and then the breeze and sound of flowing past it as the lips of the instruments went out to meet the world, beginning its lonely transit out to the universe. This guy's a poet. See why it was 500 pages? Then I passed down into the resonant black well of space inside the cello. The vibrating envelope of air formed the curves of its spruce roof and maple walls. The instrument's wooden interior formed a mouth capable of unparalleled eloquence, indeed of articulating everything a human could conceive. Homie took so much acid he became a cello. I took so many shrooms once I became a harmonica. In the canyon, I felt all 10 of my holes, piping air all over the rapids. Though listen doesn't begin to describe what transpired between me and the vibrations of the motion, never before has a piece of music pierced me as deeply as this one now. Though even to call it music is to diminish what now began to flow, which was nothing less than the stream of human consciousness, something in which one might glean the very meaning of life. And if you could bear it, read life's last chapter. Got all of that out of a box song. I'd rather trip and go to Taco Bell. Yeah, listening to music. When you're tripping and you listen to music, you become it. The Cotton Eye Joe, fundamentally unserious song. Once acid is introduced to the mist, it's an existential vision quest. Where did he come from? Where did he go? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe?
Joe Biden.
Cotton Eye Joe? After Pollan's 150 mic trip, he said, psychedelics is liable to take all the boxes off the shelf, open and remove even the most familiar items, turning them over and imaginatively scrubbing them until they shine once again with the light of first sight. Mescalito goes easy on the newbies. You gotta respect him. He's doing his own research underground. He's doing anthropology, if you will. Takes a 4-gram mushroom trip. So rather than starting from scratch to build a new perception from every batch of raw data delivered by the senses, the mind jumps to the most sensible conclusion based on past experiences combined with tiny samples of that data. Our brains are prediction machines optimized by experience. It's obvious when you think about it, but the psychedelics give you that from a new way. He called the normal brain a Bayesian interference machine. Mr. fucking Ivy trifecta. The lack of duality, such stupidity.
Smell like you farted.
It's obvious. These so-called Bayesian interferences serve us most well most of the time, speeding perception. Yeah, our brain has shortcuts. We all know. You gotta turn them off to think deeper. Huxley got this phrase from the Buddhists. Psychedelics give you access to the mind at large. Maybe we have access to that all the time, but we're too stressed. You gotta dilate. This raises an interesting question. Is it possible that the perception of schizophrenics, people tripping on psychedelics, and young children are, at least in certain instances, more accurate, less influenced by expectation, and therefore more faithful to reality than those of sane, sober adults? Sober. Man, I hate being sober. For the first time since embarking on this project, I began to understand what the volunteers in the cancer anxiety trials had been trying to tell me, how it was a psychedelic journey that had granted them a perspective from which the very worst life can throw at us, up to and including death, could be regarded objectively and accepted with equanimity. Psychedelics, it ain't the happy drug. These cancer patients, they accepted their fate with equanimity. Psychedelics, they're going to show you the truth, the mind at large, and you can accept it or go deep, deep into denial. Chapter 4, Neuroscience. The achievement of an individual self, a being with a unique past and a trajectory into the future, is one of the glories of human evolution, but it is not without its drawbacks and potential disorders. The price of the sense of an individual identity is the sense of separation from others and nature. Self-reflection can lead to great intellectual and artistic achievement, but also to destructive forms of self-regard and many types of unhappiness. The mystical experience might just be what it feels like to deactivate the brain's default mode network. This can be achieved any number of ways through psychedelics and meditation. Robert Carhart Harris and Judas Brewer have demonstrated, but perhaps also by means of certain breathing exercises. Stanley Groff. Overwhelming prayer, near-death experiences. You know how people say they feel God in the room when they give birth? What if God is always in the room, and you were just emotionally expanded enough in that moment to perceive it? I'm not going to do it right now, but I could work myself up, bro. I could feel it. The energy's here, bro. I'm talking to you through the fucking internet. God is here. I could feel it. Ooh, we're growing together. As a psychonaut acquaintance put it to me, if it were possible to temporarily experience another person's mental state, my guess is that it would feel more like a psychedelic state than a normal state because of its massive disparity with whatever mental state is habituated to you. That's heat right there. So you have this thing, no matter how hard your problems are, they're still your problems. You know how to wake up and deal with your problems the next day. If you had to wake up in somebody's brain tomorrow, you would be tripping balls. That's all psychedelics is. Are you willing to see from another person's perspective? That's why, bro, you can't experience true empathy without an altered state of mind. And people can experience better empathy if they're better at altering their assemblage point. In teaching computers how to learn and solve problems, AI designers speak in terms of high temperature and low temperature searches for the answers to questions. A low temperature search involves reaching for the most probable and nearest answer. And that's what we do. It's the shortcut thing again. Unless you can change your point of view, you're going to shortcuts without even realizing it. And again, don't do drugs. Sit up as fucking erect as you can in your meditation chair. Channel all of the energy. Get your fucking Shakti rising. Don't do drugs, but change the way you sit. Change one thing about your mudra and your fucking hand sign, and it'll change your mind. Their thinking is less constrained by experiences, so the will to try to even... He's talking about children. They have more malleable minds. We're doing on the Patreon coming up the thresholds of the mind. It's not just low temperature searches he's talking about in that book. We talk about brain hertz. And psychedelics can make it so you can sustain 20 hertz in the brain. The normal brain can work with 5 hertz. That's the whole super stack thing. You're expanding your mind. Psychedelic. In Gopnik's term, the drugs could help adults achieve the kind of fluid thinking that is second nature to kids, expanding the space of creative possibility. If, as Gopnik hypothesized, childhood is a way of injecting noise and novelty into the system of cultural evolution, psychedelics might do the same thing for the system of the adult mind. Or to put it simply, playing. Adults, they forget this word. I'm about to ask my boss, is it okay if I could go out and play? Play? Anybody remember that? Animals know play. You can, like, walk up to a squirrel and it'll start playing with you. Our minds are in the box, bro. They got us in the fucking box. Pulling up the coop in the box for 12 spot. As for those unwell, the patients who stand to gain the most are probably those suffering from kinds of mental disorders and characterizations by mental rigidity, addiction, depression, obsession. It seems plausible to me that the psychedelic experience could help us get out of those obsessive states, create opportunities in which old stories can be rewritten. Chapter 6, the final one, trip treatment. This was the biggest study of the book. They gave psilocybin to cancer patients. Go wherever it takes you, Bossis advises. Climb stairs, open doors, explore paths, fly over landscapes. But the most important advice for the journey he offered is always to move forward rather than trying to flee anything. Threatening anything monstrous that you encounter, look it straight in the eyes, dig in your heels and ask, what are you doing in my mind? Or, what can I learn from you? That's powerful. That's not for the beginners. As we said, Mescalito treats beginners with ease. Don't do peyote. That's from a Don Juan book. Bro, on a deeper trip, if there's anything there that scares you, this is your mind. What the fuck are you doing here? Can I help you?
Metro boom and make it boom.
For 80% of people, one psilocybin trip can cure depression for 6 months. God damn! I'm going to come back to that. In both the NYU and Hopkins trials, some 80% of cancer patients showed clinically significant reductions in standard measures of anxiety and depression, an effect that endured for 6 months post-psilocybin. Few, if any, psychiatric interventions of any kind have demonstrated such dramatic and sustained effects. This is better than LSD. I'm saying don't do drugs. If you're going to do it, do mushrooms. 80% of people can cure depression for 6 months. And you're just going to go straight to SSRIs? By temporarily disabling the ego, psilocybin seems to open up a new field of psychological possibility, symbolizing the death and rebirth reported by many patients I interviewed. At first, the falling away of the self feels threatening, but if one can let go and surrender, powerfully and usually positive emotions flow in, along with formerly inaccessible memories and sense impressions and meanings. When Huxley speaks of the mind's reducing valve, the faculty that eliminates as much of the world from our consciousness as it lets in, he is talking about the ego. That stingy, vigilant security guard admits only the narrowest bandwidth of reality, a measly trickle of consciousness. No longer defended by the ego, the gate of self and Huxley's reducing valve is love. How you gonna write a fucking book about psychedelics, not talk about love? Bertrand Russell wrote, the best way to overcome one's fear of death is to make your interest gradually wider and more impersonal bit by bit until the walls of ego recede and your life becomes increasingly merged into the universal life. Sounds kind of cultish. Just sit there, meditate, and beat off, man. An individual human existence should be like a river, small at first, narrowly contained within its banks, rushing passionately past rocks and over waterfalls. Gradually, the river grows wider, the banks recede, the waters flow more quietly, and in the end, without any visible break, they become merged in the sea and painlessly lose their individual being. Yeah, I don't know if you want to take this guy's advice about dying. He lied about Al Hubbard, the undercover operative, before. This is the book. NYU Hopkins studies, they also tested cigarettes. 6 months after their psychedelic sessions, 80% of the volunteers were confirmed as abstinent. At the 1-year mark, the figure had fallen to 67%, which is a still better success rate than the best treatments available. Psychedelics open a window of mental flexibility in which people can let go of mental models. 66% of people, 2/3 of people, can give up smoking for a year after one trip. What are we doing? You have to try my patch and these pills and get on snus for a little bit. Trip once, done. It deactivates your default mode network. Your demon. Demons! Our true addiction is to the pattern of thinking with the self at the center of it. So much of human suffering stems from having the self that needs to be psychologically defended at all costs. We're trapped in a story that sees ourselves as independent, isolated agents acting in the world. But that self is an illusion. It can be a useful illusion within the walls of society, but at the systematic level, there is no truth to it. Depression, obsession, eating disorders are all exacerbated by the tyranny of ego, tyranny, and the fixed narratives it constructs about our relationships to the world. Depression. Volunteers depicted the depression foremost as the state of disconnection, whether from people or other selves, or their former selves, or their spiritual values or nature. You get disconnected, you're going to get depressed. Others felt that they were stuck in endless circles of rumination, like into mental gridlock, and were reminded by Carhart-Harris's hypothesis that impression might be the result of an overactive default mode network. Your demon is off its chain. Participants reported new access to difficult emotions that often... It's not going to be easy. I'm saying you don't take this and have fun. You're going to cry. You're going to experience things you've been avoiding. Final quote from Michael Pollan. Buddhists believe that attachment is at the root of all mental suffering. If the neuroscience is right, a lot of these attachments have their mooring in the default mode network where they are nurtured and sustained. Brewer thinks that by diminishing its activity, whether by means of meditation or psychedelics, we can learn to be with our thoughts and cravings without getting caught up in them. Achieving such a detachment from our thoughts and feelings and desires is what Buddhism teaches is the surest path out of human suffering. Leave the Buddhism, take the hypertropic breathing. A little hippie history for you today. There you guys have it. How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. That was a fun one for sure. Check out Harry Shit every single night. We put up a meme. And next week, we got a hot one. We got Jordan Peterson coming back beyond order. We're going full circle back to the first year of the show, and I'll put a new spin on the Peterson this time around. Thank you guys who have been here from the start. My name is Nick Muniz. I'll see you in 7 short days.